The vehicle now can drive all the way down the road. We have all these obstacles that they can collide with. It has a whole bunch of physics applied to it, but our vehicle still moves a little bit fast, so we want to be able to change it, and we also want to be able to see it. To do that, we're going to use something called a variable. So, in our player controller script, right underneath this first curly brace, underneath player controller, we're going to create a new line by pressing enter. And then on that new line, we're going to create our very first variable. So we're actually going to use this variable to be able to change this number here. So usually in code, it's pretty bad, especially when you have what's called a hard-coded number, because that means that if you ever need to change it, say we reuse speed for some reason ever again, we'd have to keep changing the number 20 versus we could just change the number in our variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the word float. Now, float is a keyword that helps the computer know that we're creating a number with decimals in it. And then we're actually going to say what the name of this variable is. So we can call it speed. And we're going to use the equal sign here. Now, it's very important. The equal sign to your code is very different than an equal sign when you're doing math in the real world. So this actually will assign our speed variable a value. So our speed will be set to whatever number we put next, and it will store that number whenever we need it. So because we are using decimals, we'll type a 5.0, so this is a decimal, and then we add a semicolon at the end, so that way we know we're at the end of this line. We are done with our statement. Now you can see that our IDE is pretty mad at us right now. There's this red underline, and it says that it doesn't understand what this 5.0 means. So actually what we need to do is we need to tell our program that this is a float, and so we add the F at the end. So now, as our computer tries to understand this line of code, now our computer knows that 5.0 is supposed to be a float specifically, so we add that F at the end. So now we have our speed variable. It's always carrying the number 5. If we ever need to, we can change it to be 10 or 20, whatever we want it to be. And so where we have our 20 in our update method, where we're transform.translating our object, we'll take out our 20 and just put speed. So now our code knows that we are multiplying by the value 5, even though we're using the word speed. So that's very helpful. So now, if we test our game, our vehicle should be moving a little slower. Not bad, so it's moving about 5 meters a second, and now it's just pushing those boxes along. Now, we want to actually be able to see this speed variable in Unity. So right now, our speed variable is a variable that belongs to this entire class. It's what we call a member variable. And right now, it can only be seen inside of methods inside of this class, and it can't be used outside of this class. Now, we can actually use the word private to denote the level of access that somebody has with our speed variable. The private keyword is what's called an access modifier. In fact, the public keyword is also an access modifier. So private can only be accessed within this class. In fact, this start and update method are both inherently private, so you don't actually need to type the word private. Versus the word public means that you can access, you can see, you can use this class in other places. So in fact, we want to be able to see and interact with our speed variable. So we will actually make this a public variable. So now that we've used the public keyword to modify its access, we should be able to see it in Unity. Now, a cool thing that happens when we go into Unity, if we click on our vehicle in the hierarchy, in the inspector, underneath the player controller script, you can actually see our speed variable now because it's public. And we can actually change the values however we want just by typing in any number. So I'll set this to 15, and then we'll press play. And you should see the car zip down the road, and a cool thing I can do if I left click and drag on the speed variable on the word itself, if I drag it to the left, it actually brings it negative. So you can see it racing down the runway. Then if I bring it up, it goes up. And so this is a cool way to see exactly how fast you really want this vehicle to go. And then 5's kind of a good speed. Let's make it to like 11 or so, 12, cool. Now when we stop playing, our speed variable reset to 15. Well, if you remember, when we enter play mode, if we edit values, it'll reset those values when we exit to the way that it started when we were in our scene. So it actually set it back to 15. So we'll just bring this to like 10 for now, and then we'll save. A fun little tip for when you're programming, something that people commonly say whenever they create their variable, but then also assign it a value at the same time. This is called initializing a variable. And so we initialize the speed variable to be at 5.0 for its speed. So what you're going to do is you're going to create your very first variable so we can store the speed that we want our vehicle to move. Make sure that you use the keyword public so that way we can see this variable outside of this class and use it. Use the keyword float, that way we know that our speed variable is a number that uses decimals. We can choose what we want to name our variable, so we'll name it speed, and then we use the equal sign to assign or to set our speed to be 5, and then make sure if you use the .0 just to add an F at the end, so that way our program knows that this is a decimal number. And then in your update method, change the 20 to speed and test your game. And then while your game's playing, if you select the vehicle and then you go into play mode, you can actually left click on the speed under the player controller and drag it, and you can change the